Hello! So, Black Square have finally released the G36 Bonanza for Microsoft Flight Simulator. So this is based on the Bonanza that comes with the simulator, but internally it's a whole different story. So you may remember, if you've flown the G36 Bonanza in Flight Sim in the past, it had a glass cockpit using the G1000s. This is a whole different story. So the external is the same model, but as soon as you go inside you get a brand new cockpit. So let's get this lit up first, so at least we can have a look at it. So I'm going to take the yokes off and come down to the battery, and then at least come and turn on the panel flood and panel lights, so you can see. It's a gloomy rainy day. We're at Wycombe Air Park, by the way, and yes, this is exactly what it looks like outside the window from my house right now. So it's pretty horrific. Okay, so you've obviously got an analog cockpit within this version of the G36, and it's fantastic, it has to be said. I've had a quick look at it just to get my bearings of where things are. It's really good. The modelling is absolutely wonderful throughout, so everything works in predictable manners in the way that you would imagine it should. So there is a 90-page PDF that comes with it that goes through absolutely everything to do with the cockpit and how the systems interoperate, how the failure systems work. But obviously we're not going to read that at all. We're just going to follow our nose and get into trouble. So anyway, let's go and get this aeroplane up and running. We're going to take it for a test flight from Wycombe over to Oxford. So, okay, we've turned the battery on. We are going to go and turn on the beacon light to tell everybody outside. We'll put the nav light on as well. So let's just go and make sure that's working. So yes, the nav lights are on and the beacon is flashing away up there. Okay, so to get the engine started, we will need to move the fuel condition. I think we press this button first and then we can turn it. There we go. So we'll put on the left tank, which is fine. We will move the mixture to rich. It's worth pointing out the Black Square G36 Bonanza comes with several different variants. There is the normally aspirated version and the turbo version. I'm flying the normally aspirated one today, so I'll do another video another day on the turbo version. Okay, so I've put the mixture forwards, we've moved the propeller to high RPM, we crack the throttle open, we put the fuel pump onto low and give it a few seconds. And again, so all of the dials and everything around the cockpit are going to behave in the ways that the real aircraft behaves. So then we will turn the mags to both and then hold start on for a second. And the engine kicks over and there it goes. So we can now turn the fuel pump back to low. Or back to off, sorry. And start firing things up around the aeroplane. So we've got the alternator now. And we've got the master avionics switch, so you can see things like the HSI centering itself there. We'll go, before we go much further, and align this to the runway direction. So we want about 245 degrees. Again, it's showing nav at the moment because this is in CDI mode probably. Yeah, it's in GPS mode, and obviously the GPS is not providing any data to it yet, so you've got a flag there saying nav. So there's lots of things that all make sense. So the wonderful thing about aircraft that are modelled this accurately is you can actually, you can trace faults or trace warnings, and it will all make sense. So we're just going to let the GPS align to the satellites. You can switch the kit out in common with all the other Black Square aircraft. Oh, we've got an engine monitor here as well, by the way. So you can switch out the avionics kit. So if you've got a GTN 750 installed, you can do that live while you're in the cockpit. We've also got a Bendix weather radar that works. So if we go and turn it to on, wait for it to fire up. So here it comes. It's worth pointing out this has got hidden functionality. So if we turn it to nav, you can see there's the engine condition. So if we say repair engine, it's at 99% at the moment, it come back up to 100. We can refill the oxygen, we can reset any failures that have happened. In the next page, if we move this around to log, we get to control how failures happen. So you can actually go into here and look at the detailed settings, and there's lots and lots of it. to do with setting up failures. But obviously we're not going to do that. We're going to have an aeroplane that works wonderfully today. Okay, so let's get back towards getting this aeroplane ready. So you can see it's quite cold today. I'm amazed the cabin temperature warning hasn't come on. Oh, it's showing 29 centigrade. Is that correct? 30 centigrade. Oh, that's because I had the cabin heat pulled out. So I pushed it back in. That's an interesting one. So this aircraft tends to remember where switches and levers are. So you need to be careful of that when you are shutting the aircraft down. So in the time we were talking, after I got the engine started, because I had the cabin heat pulled out, it warmed us up and nearly cooked us. So I'll put it on about halfway. Okay, let's go and program a basic routine for the day then, and we'll then go and fly the route and see how we get on. So we'll go and look at the GPS. So it's typical Garmin 430 or 530, sorry. We can go and use the keyboard. So EGTB, which is Booker, enter. We're going to go to Oxford, which is EG. Oh, can I remember? It's Kidlington, isn't it? EGTK. If the keyboard would listen to me today. Kidlington, yeah, there we go. So we're going to Kidlington, but we're going to do it via a slightly strange route, just to make this a bit more interesting. So we're going to go via Bentsu and Finma. And then we'll, for some reason, this waypoint is not in the system, so we're not going to worry too much. We'll fly a vector, which will give us some things to do along the way, to be honest. So we're going to go via Bentsu and Finma. So if I roll this back up, and on top of that put in Bentsu, and enter, and then Finma. So we click on the keyboard and Finma, and enter. So we've got our basic route in there to get to Oxford, and we can zoom out and see that route. You can see this. Obviously we're going to fly across to get the runway direction when we get closer. Anyway, what we might do while we're here as well is put this on the first page of the page group that shows us the numbers as well as the map, which is quite cool. Let's move the course around to the runway direction. We've already done that, haven't we? Yeah. And we're using GPS, so this isn't going to make a great deal of difference to us. But we'll at least put it on 244 degrees on the runway takeoff direction, so we get some idea of the route on the HSI as we fly. I think we're more or less there, so we'll go and taxi out, and then we'll get the rest of the switches put in place when we are there. So flaps to takeoff position, parking brake off, open the throttle gently, and we are rolling. So I'll sit in the seat properly. We're showing it in gear up. Okay, there was a problem there with the switch on my controller, so at least you do get the indications of things that are maybe not configured absolutely correctly. We're going to set our target altitude. We're going to fly it as well, so we'll go immediately out to say 6,000 feet. We'll have a play with the autopilot along the way. But the thing of most interest to us today is just a basic look at the avionics to see how things work, and that things do work. Okay, so we're on the apron ahead of runway 24, parking brake back on for a moment, and let's go and turn on the landing lights and we won't need taxi lights actually, and the strobes. We'll turn the pitot heat on as well now, and we're pretty much ready to go. So parking brake off. So we are going to be careful with the manifold pressure. We're not going to run the engine flat out because it will damage it. We've got a pretty significant crosswind, so we're just going to counter that and nose up. And gear up. flaps up. So let's just get this back on the runway direction. The wind is really pushing us around. Coming up through... Oh, I didn't calibrate the altimeter. That was naughty. Okay. Coming up through 1500 feet. Just trimming the elevator for the climb. Okay, so I'm going to go and engage the autopilot now, which is over here. So we'll go for heading mode straight away. So it's got some work to do immediately because it started to drift to the left while we were messing around there. We're also going to go and tell this now to go to arm that altitude, and we'll do it at 1,000 feet a minute. So you can see it's straightening up. It's weaving a little bit actually, isn't it? That's interesting. It's getting it under control though. So if we zoom this in, let's see how well it does. So if we go and switch the autopilot over to nav mode now, so it's going to follow the track. So let's zoom in a bit further on that. So it should fly to Bentsu, then make the right turn. You can see the weather radar is lighting up as you would expect, which is good. I'm not sure if the pitch makes much difference to it. Should we try it? If we turn this down to so downward facing a bit more, is it picking? I don't think it makes a lot of difference. Obviously we can change the range, which is quite cool. So we can see the 20-mile range on the rainstorms around us, which there are significant rainstorms around. Okay, so I'm going to come back off the throttle gently. The RPM is a bit high, so I'm going to pull that back. And also pull the mixture back gently. So we're making the turn now at Bentsu. So the HSI really becomes a moot point unless you keep adjusting it. It's doing the turn quite nicely actually, so it's cutting the corner. So the next heading would be 349 degrees. So we can replicate that by moving the course mark around to 349. Which can be about there. So the klaxon there, or the beep, is we are within 1,000 feet of our target. Maybe if we said 6,000 feet. Okay, so it's just acquiring the trek. Obviously we've got some wind going on. You can see here there's 25 knots from the left, which is why the aircraft is crabbing on the trek. Okay, so we're on our way to Oxford. You can see on the lower screen here we've got 23 miles of the current leg to go. So we can have a look around the cockpit. We've got this is captured the altitude now. Look, so the indications you get from this hardware around the cockpit is fantastic. So let's have a look at playing with VORs while that's all going on. So if we just say to fly that heading for the moment, so we're going to change this to align the heading with the direction we're going, because then we want to go play with the VOR radios. So we've aligned the heading bug. We'll just say go to heading mode on the autopilot, which is down here. So we're now flying to that. We're not tracking the GPS anymore. Let's get rid of that message. Okay, so let's go and tune in a VOR nearby just to see how this is going to behave. Let's go for the BS, oh it's Benson, that's a Vortex. Let's go for the Bovingdon one. 11375 over to our right. So we'll switch over here and we want 113.75. Switch it to active. So you can see suddenly the direction has swung around. Are we being kicked off the route yet? No, we're not, we're fine. So if we were to switch this over to VLOC now, obviously this will reflect it. So we could spin this around and notice the distance measuring equipment is showing up now, which is good. And we can... I love that you can see that wobble in it. I don't know if you noticed that. It settled after it moved. So there's momentum in the needle, which is absolutely like the real thing, which is fantastic. So we're saying we're 15 and a bit miles away at about 83 degrees, something like that. So we could test that out from here. So if we say measure 82 degrees, 15.2 or 0.3 if I put the mouse on the other side of it. There you go. So it's absolutely dead on. It's on the numbers. So you can do radio navigation in this really confidently. It's a bit scary that we can't see the horizon, but that's why we have an attitude indicator. So you rely on your instruments in instrument flight conditions. Okay, let's go and zoom out a little bit. We should see we're approaching our turning point soon. Finma. We've got 16 miles to run. So yeah, I love that this has got so many things to play with now. So obviously engine condition is still 100% because we are being very careful to look after the engine. So you know, we're adjusting trim and we're adjusting mixture along the way. We can probably come back to 50% mixture. It'd be interesting to see the needles moving when we do that. Let's have a think about this. So when we... Oh, should we put this back onto GPS mode for the moment and let it follow the track? Actually, talking about that, this line through Finma actually is directly in line with the Daventry VOR. So if we use that 11640, we can test out the autopilot for doing that as well. So 11640, make that the active VOR frequency, swing this around. Oh, we have to put this on VOR mode, sorry. Swing this around. So you can see we're probably pretty accurately going straight towards it anyway. Or not. It's about 10 degrees off our nose. So if we were to go on nav mode now on the autopilot, obviously it's going to track the VOR. Yeah, so the reason it's 10 degrees off our nose is obviously because we're having to crab as well because of the crosswind. But we're coming back to that radial, the 50 degree radial by the look of it. So it will crab away from it as it hits that crosswind. So as it adjusts itself. And get rid of these messages. We're not really worried about VNav. Let's put the weather radar back on. So all I was thinking is we could use this as a bit of a marker. So what we'll do, if we measure distance from here, when we get to 11 and a bit miles from the VOR, we'll make our left turn and follow 252 degrees or 250 degrees basically, which will take us into the ILS. Does that make sense? So we're just going to wait for this number to come down to 11 miles on here, and then we will turn to 252 degrees. So I'm going to set my heading bug ahead of time. So when we get to 11 miles on the distance measuring equipment, we're going to go straight for heading mode basically. We could go a few more degrees on the I'm just looking at the wind. The wind's at 240. If we wanted to fly straight into it, which would be quite handy. Now we'll leave it at 250. Gives us a longer run-in. It's all good fun, isn't it? Lots of things to play with now in an aeroplane, and they all work, which isn't always the story with Flight Simulator. Some of the cheaper aeroplanes don't really work. This one isn't very expensive. This was £24, and to get this amount of fidelity in the cockpit is absolutely fantastic, I have to say. You don't get the niceties like the doors working as the Coronados tend to do or anything like that. They really have replaced just this whole area of the cockpit completely. They make a lot of noise about the turbo modelling in the other model of the Bonanza, so I have yet to find that out. This engine monitor down here is quite cool. So obviously there's lots of stuff in the book about this. So we're still very, very hot in the cockpit, so I'm going to turn that down a bit. Excuse me. I apologise for my croaky voice again. I've not been in a great place with health just recently. Caught a wicked cold on the way back from a few days away. So you can see the clouds are approaching on the weather radar. The rain is approaching, so you should see it soon. Let's level this up a bit. It's quite cool, isn't it? I think flying by instruments is much more fun. So we're down to 14 miles away now from the VOR. 13. So we're getting near to our turning point, or the point at which we switch over to heading mode basically. And as soon as we go for heading mode on the autopilot, the plane will turn left. Yeah, it's wanting to do it now, look, according to our original plan, but we don't want to do that. We want to wait till Finma. 12 miles to go. We're going to ignore this having a shout about the GPS. And let's go for heading mode. Let's do it at 12 miles, it doesn't matter really. And we'll start descending now as well. So to descend, it's rather straightforward with this. We just set the target altitude, so we'll set to 2,500 feet or 700 feet. We arm that altitude and then we can control the vertical speed to get there. So we'll come down at 500 feet a minute. Now we are flying heading mode. We can go and change the ILS over. The radio frequency over to 108.35 and the course to 191. So 108.35. So make that active and change the course to 191 degrees, which is the runway direction relative to us. So 180, 190, 1 degrees. So now you can see we're going to be turning left onto the approach. Yeah, so we're to the left of the approach, which is absolutely correct if you think about it. Now look at that wind pushing us away. I mean, it's not going to make much difference. We just have a longer run-in. So we could change that heading bug. Go for 240. So it'll be directly into the wind, so we won't be pushed away anymore. So we're coming slowly down. Let's come down a bit more steeply. So 1,000 feet a minute, please, until we get to our target altitude. So we push this, we can see what that is. So we've got to 2,700. The reason I've said 2,700 is I haven't actually checked this. Yeah, Kidlington is 263 feet above sea level. So that would be, if 2,500 feet, you'd want 2,750 feet if you came into the feathers here. So we probably want 2,600 by the time we get to where we're going. Yeah. So we arm that, and then we tell it, yeah, to continue on down at 1,000 feet a minute. We're still going in heading mode. It'd be interesting if we come in below, we're above the glide slope as far as this is concerned at the moment. So if we come in, let's go for 1,500 feet. We're getting a bit fast, so I'm going to come off the throttle. If we just come down a little bit more steeply, I want to try and get below the glide slope by the time we get there. We could also have a game on here with pressing the OBS button. Will it allow us to do it? There we go. So now we can see the line of the runway. So let's just zoom in a bit. So when we hit that line, we will turn left. So as we cross that line, the radio beacon, the CDI course deviation indicator, will sweep into the middle of the HSI instrument. So we're still descending 1,500 feet a minute. We're still above the glide slope, but here it comes. It's starting to move. It's not wanting to come down any more steeply because we're getting close to our target altitude. So here comes the HSI. So what I'm going to do at this point is turn off the autopilot, and we'll turn in and fly it ourselves now. So the sound there is the klaxon if you reduce the throttle too much without the gear down. So we're using the attitude indicator here and looking at the instruments, and hopefully it's all making sense. The flight director's having a bit of a bad day. So we are below the glide slope now, so let's just pull up a bit, level out, watch our vertical speed. So let's get the gear down, get this trimmed out as well so it doesn't keep diving on me. There we go. So we're off to the left, so we'll just straighten up. So flaps to the first position. We are low, but it was nice to get out of the cloud, so at least got some visibility of the ground. So we're back on the localizer, so as long as we stay level, we'll cross through the glide slope. So we're just watching the vertical speed here, keeping an eye on the speed, watching the attitude indicator, watching the HSI, and we can start descending now. So we've descended far too quickly. There we go. We're off to the right, so we'll just correct for that. Turbulence is quite vicious today. So gear is down. We're getting there. It's a shame that there's a bug in this airport scenery. So you can see there's the runway has appeared. There's a bug in the airport scenery though with the shaders, with the mist, which doesn't quite work. So obviously we have visuals now on the runway. Quite a big runway at Oxford, so obviously we've got lots of room to execute our landing. Gone a bit long, but it will do. Okay, given the conditions, I think we can be excused. Oh look, the sim has frozen. Is it going to release? And what will it do when it releases is the bigger question. There it goes. Okay, flaps up. Roll in. So we'll just press F to center the screen up. So as you can see, it changes the story in the Bonanza enormously, doesn't it? Having analog gauges that work, having an altitude pre-selector that works, having, you know, HSI that behaves as you'd expect it to, it's really, really nice. And being able to, you saw, switching modes and playing with the different instruments to navigate, with everything working, and if you can trust the instruments, it just changes the game entirely. It becomes fun. Okay, just taxi in. Where should we park? Where the guy is over here. There's a Cessna in our way. There's a van parked in the middle of that parking area. Or we're going to ignore the van and go around it. There we go. So, get the yoke out of the way. We can just pull the mixture to kill the engine. Let's see how we did in terms of looking after the engine. 98%. So obviously that shutdown procedure wasn't quite as it should have been. It may have even been lowering it to idle on approach caused that. We'll have to have a read about that and see about proper engine management procedures. Otherwise, great fun. Absolutely great fun. So we just go through everything and turn everything back off now, so we can push in, remembering that this is going to remember the switch positions, so I need to get this right really. So this goes back to off, and we can turn the avionics off. We'll turn the lights off first, and the avionics master switch can go off, alternator can come off, and the battery can come off, and the propeller condition can be pulled back. And okay, so we're pretty much done. So hopefully you enjoyed that. So that's the G36, the black square G36 Bonanza, available from Just Flight today. It's £24, I think. I think it's great value, and not just because of this, but because you get the turbo model as well, which I've not even looked at yet. So obviously I'll be coming back to look at the turbo model as well. So yes, hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll see you again soon.